It was a normal morning at Hyundai's massive Georgia EV battery plant, until it wasn't. Workers arrived to a scene that looked like chaos had arrived before them. Assembly lines halted mid-operation, subcontractors frozen in place, and engineers staring at incomplete installations. The air buzzed not with the hum of machinery, but with uncertainty and tension. Then the scale of the situation became clear. Federal agents had descended on the facility in what is now the largest workplace immigration raid in United States history. 475 people were arrested, most of them South Korean nationals. Men and women who had come to Georgia to work on one of the most ambitious automotive projects in decades were suddenly being led away in handcuffs. What was supposed to be a $7 billion investment designed to create over 8,000 American jobs had transformed overnight into a flashpoint for international outrage, a diplomatic headache, and a looming economic uncertainty. For Hyundai, the raid didn't just disrupt the plant, it sent shockwaves through the global investment community, raising a chilling question. If following United States policies can lead to this kind of crackdown, can foreign companies really trust America as a stable place to build the factories of tomorrow? In this story, the chaos at a single plant isn't just about arrests, it's the first domino in a chain that could ripple through jobs, supply chains, and even United States relations with key allies. To understand why the Georgia raid hit so hard, we need to step back and look at Hyundai's plan. In 2022, the company announced a $7 billion electric vehicle battery plant in Georgia, a project designed to expand United States production and create thousands of jobs. This wasn't just any factory, it was part of a broader push to bring advanced manufacturing to America, aligning perfectly with President Trump's Bring Jobs Home tariffs. The message was clear: foreign companies that invested in United States operations could avoid penalties and benefit from the new trade environment. Hyundai's Georgia facility was meant to be a model of foreign investment under United States policy, showing the world that building in America was not only possible, but profitable. Engineers and technical experts from South Korea were brought in to train American workers, transfer know-how, and ensure that such a cutting-edge facility could operate efficiently. But here's the contradiction. Hyundai followed the rules, invested billions, and created a plan to train American workers. Yet it became the target of the most aggressive immigration raid in United States history. The very policy that was supposed to encourage investment now seemed to punish it. It's like being rewarded for following a map, only to find the ground crumbling beneath your feet. This tension sets the stage for the next question. What happened immediately after the raid, and how did it impact production, schedules, and costs? That's where the real economic ripple effect begins. The moment federal agents entered the Hyundai plant, work ground to an abrupt halt. Assembly lines stopped mid-operation, and technicians who were installing critical battery modules were forced to step aside. Subcontractors, many of whom had flown in from other countries to provide specialized expertise, were sidelined, unable to continue their delicate installation work. For a facility handling cutting-edge EV battery technology, even a few hours of disruption can cascade into weeks of delays. Economists and construction analysts quickly began calculating the financial impact. On a $4.3 billion facility, a one-month delay in construction or installation can add 0.5 to 1% to total costs, which translates to $21 to $43 million per month. If the disruption lasts 2 months, as some sources feared, the overruns could exceed $80 million. Beyond the raw numbers, the delays threaten the timing of production schedules. Hyundai had aimed to start battery output by late 2025, but even a short stoppage could push the supply chain into 2026, complicating plans for North American electric vehicle production. The ripple effects extend beyond Hyundai. EV manufacturers across the continent rely on a precise schedule of battery deliveries, and any delay creates a bottleneck that affects assembly lines, distribution, and ultimately, consumers. In industries like automotive manufacturing, time literally equals money. A delayed plant doesn't just cost the company, it affects suppliers, logistics networks, and workforce planning. The chaotic scene in Georgia is more than a news story. It's a real-world example of how policy, enforcement, and timing collide to create massive economic consequences. President Donald Trump defended the raid as strict enforcement of United States immigration law, insisting that foreign firms must comply with rules and train American workers if they want access to the U.S. market. In his view, the operation was about protecting American jobs and ensuring that companies investing in the United States actually benefit the local workforce. ICE was doing right because they were here illegally, Trump stated, emphasizing the legal justification for the arrests. But the raid also exposed a broader tension in Trump's economic agenda. On one hand, his tariffs and policies push foreign companies to invest in the United States, encouraging billions in new factories, technology transfer, and job creation. On the other hand, aggressive immigration enforcement risks undermining these very investments by removing the skilled workers essential to complex projects like Hyundai's EV battery plant. It's a paradox. Policies meant to strengthen U.S. manufacturing can also destabilize it. This contradiction doesn't just affect Hyundai. It sends a signal to the entire global investment community. Even companies following U.S. guidance may face unexpected risks. For policymakers, investors, and multinational corporations, the Georgia raid raises a critical question. Can foreign companies trust that investing in the U.S. under Trump's policies will be safe, or are they stepping into a minefield of uncertainty? The answer to that question begins to unfold in the international reaction, especially from South Korea. The raid didn't just rattle Hyundai, it sent shockwaves through the South Korean government and business community. Of the 475 people detained, more than 300 were confirmed South Korean nationals, prompting Seoul to act swiftly. The South Korean government chartered flights to bring its citizens home, while the foreign minister traveled to Washington to express strong diplomatic concerns. The incident was widely described in South Korea as humiliating, especially given the context. The country had pledged hundreds of billions of dollars in new U.S. investment just months earlier. Hyundai alone had committed $26 billion in U.S. investments through 2028, a portion of which was directly tied to the Georgia EV battery plant. These plans were meant to create thousands of American jobs while advancing cutting-edge EV technology. But now, the raid created a climate of fear and uncertainty. South Korean industry groups publicly stated that while visa and immigration rules need enforcement, the way the raid was executed made it nearly impossible for complex projects to operate efficiently, sending a message that even compliance might not guarantee protection. The diplomatic fallout highlights a broader consequence. When a country aggressively enforces domestic laws without accounting for international business realities, it risks straining long-term alliances. For South Korea, a key economic partner and investor in America's growing EV sector, the raid was more than a regulatory action. It was a signal that U.S. policy could be unpredictable, jeopardizing billions in planned investments and raising serious questions about the security of future projects. This international tension underscores the delicate balance between law enforcement, foreign investment, and economic growth, a balance now visibly tipping in Georgia. The Hyundai raid sent a clear and chilling message to the global business community. Even when companies follow U.S. policy and invest billions in American projects, they are not immune to sudden enforcement actions. For multinational corporations, this raises serious concerns about the predictability and stability of the U.S. investment climate. If a company can be penalized for adhering to rules, how can executives confidently commit to large-scale manufacturing projects that require years of planning, billions in capital, and highly specialized labor? Global manufacturing, especially in high-tech industries like electric vehicles, depends heavily on specialized foreign labor. Engineers and technical experts often travel across borders to train local workers and ensure smooth production. Hyundai's Georgia plant is a prime example. Without South Korean specialists, crucial knowledge transfer and installation of advanced battery systems would stall. Strict immigration enforcement, while legally justified, clashes with this practical reality, leaving companies in a difficult position, either risk non-compliance or face operational disruptions that threaten profitability. This dilemma is not just theoretical. For companies evaluating the U.S. as a production hub, the raid raises the real risk of long-term deterrence. Foreign firms may think twice before relocating high-value operations to America, fearing policy contradictions or sudden regulatory crackdowns. In effect, what was designed to attract investment under Trump's Bring Jobs Home strategy now risks achieving the opposite, creating a climate of uncertainty that discourages exactly the economic activity the administration aims to encourage. The Hyundai case becomes a cautionary tale for investors, weighing the balance between potential profits and regulatory risk in the U.S. While the Hyundai raid grabbed headlines, it is only one piece of a larger puzzle. Trump's aggressive trade and tariff policies, particularly on steel and aluminum. In 2025, the administration imposed 50% tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum, targeting goods that are critical to U.S. manufacturing, especially the auto sector. These tariffs were intended to boost domestic production and reduce reliance on foreign suppliers, aligning with the America First narrative. But the reality is far more complicated. Canada has long been a vital supplier for U.S. automakers, providing specialized steel and aluminum grades essential for building vehicles like the Ford F-Series and General Motors high-volume models. The North American auto supply chain relies on precise quantities, grades, and delivery schedules. When tariffs disrupt this flow, automakers face higher costs, tighter margins, and production delays. The irony is stark. Policies meant to protect American jobs are indirectly putting those same jobs at risk by destabilizing the material supply needed for domestic factories. The combination of raids like Hyundai's and sweeping tariffs paints a picture of policy tension and uncertainty. Foreign companies are told to invest in U.S. projects, yet the tools used to protect domestic industry, tariffs and aggressive enforcement, can undermine those very investments. For automakers, manufacturers, and suppliers, these moves ripple through every stage of production, from raw materials to finished vehicles. The stage is set for the next question. How is Canada responding to protect its own industry while navigating these disruptions? So Canada's response to the U.S. tariffs has been, well, strategic and calculated, rather than reactive. Recognizing that steel and aluminum are critical to both its domestic economy and the North American auto supply chain, Ottawa implemented counter-tariffs, tightened procurement rules, and offered financial support to major producers. These measures ensured that Canadian companies could maintain operations, safeguard jobs, and remain competitive even under the pressure of a 50% U.S. tariff. Beyond immediate protections, Canada is pivoting its industrial strategy. Instead of relying heavily on U.S. auto demand, Canadian steel and aluminum producers are being encouraged to diversify output toward domestic infrastructure projects, housing construction, defense applications, and other critical sectors. This approach strengthens the domestic economy, reduces vulnerability to political shocks south of the border, and ensures that thousands of skilled workers remain employed in stable, long-term roles. The contrast with U.S. policy is striking. While the U.S. relies on tariffs and enforcement to protect domestic jobs, Canada is turning trade pressure into an opportunity, building resilience into its industrial base. This long-term strategy highlights the unintended consequences of aggressive U.S. protectionism. Instead of strengthening U.S. manufacturing, it may be pushing Canada and other allies to reduce dependence on American markets, creating a more independent and secure supply chain outside of U.S. control. The impact of tariffs and supply disruptions isn't just political, it hits manufacturers and consumers directly in the wallet. With Canadian steel and aluminum facing a 50% levy, costs for raw materials have surged. For U.S. automakers, this is particularly damaging. Vehicles like the Ford F-Series trucks rely heavily on aluminum from Quebec, and high-quality flat steel from Canada is essential for car bodies and frames. As prices rise, each vehicle can carry an extra $80 to $200 in material costs, and across the industry, this can quickly add up to $1 to $2 billion within months. These higher costs ripple through the production chain. Automakers may delay production, cut margins, or pass expenses on to consumers. Suppliers and smaller firms, unlike global giants, often cannot absorb sudden price shocks, leaving factories idle and workers at risk of layoffs. The disruption isn't hypothetical. It's already affecting contracts, delivery schedules, and operational planning, creating uncertainty that can stall investment and slow innovation. In essence, tariffs meant to protect and strengthen U.S. industry can paradoxically weaken it. By raising input costs and destabilizing key supply chains, these measures put manufacturers in a difficult position. They must either absorb financial losses or make tough decisions about staffing, production, and pricing. The result is a complex economic ripple effect that stretches far beyond border disputes, affecting jobs, prices, and the overall health of the U.S. manufacturing sector. The effects of tariffs and supply disruptions don't stop at factory gates. They filter down to everyday Americans. When steel and aluminum costs rise, the price increases are quickly reflected in goods people use daily. Cars become more expensive, home appliances like refrigerators and washers cost more, And even everyday items such as canned food and electronics carry higher price tags. For many families, these increases hit the budget in a very tangible way. Smaller companies and local businesses feel the squeeze even more acutely. Unlike global corporations that can absorb or hedge against sudden cost spikes, these businesses often face hard choices: raise prices, cut staff, or reduce production. Communities built around manufacturing jobs can quickly experience layoffs, idle factories, and a decline in local economic activity. The ripple effect spreads far beyond the factory floor, touching households, schools, and services that rely on a healthy local economy. In short, what starts as a policy targeting imported materials or foreign workers cascades into real-life consequences for millions of Americans. Higher vehicle prices, more expensive groceries, and shrinking employment opportunities all illustrate how trade and immigration decisions, while political in nature, ultimately shape the cost of living and the stability of communities across the country. This brings us to another layer of complexity: mixed signals in the EV industry and the contradictions within Trump's broader industrial strategy. The Hyundai raid and steel tariffs reveal a deeper contradiction in President Trump's industrial agenda, especially in the electric vehicle sector. On one hand, Trump is pushing for factories to be built on U.S. soil, promoting domestic EV production as a way to create jobs and boost American manufacturing. On the other hand, he has openly expressed skepticism toward EVs, questioning their viability and long-term value. For companies trying to navigate these signals, the message is confusing. Invest in EV manufacturing, but be prepared for policies that may complicate operations. This tension is particularly problematic for allies like South Korea. Hyundai, LG Energy, and other international firms must weigh the promise of American incentives against the risks of unpredictable enforcement. Sending specialized engineers to train U.S. workers is necessary for complex projects, yet aggressive immigration raids make these investments risky. Mixed signals from Washington can shake investor confidence, leading to delays, scaled-back projects, or even redirection of capital to other countries with more stable policy frameworks. In practice, the contradiction also affects timelines and costs. EV factories rely on precise coordination of specialized labor, materials, and technology. If policies create uncertainty, whether through raids, tariffs, or conflicting messaging, every month of delay carries financial consequences. This creates a broader lesson. Rhetoric and incentives alone aren't enough to attract investment. Companies need predictable, coherent policies to make large-scale commitments, and without them, even well-intentioned initiatives like Made in the USA EV factories face major hurdles. The Hyundai raid, combined with sweeping tariffs on steel and aluminum, underscores a critical lesson. Aggressive protectionist measures can backfire. Policies meant to strengthen U.S. manufacturing, raising tariffs, enforcing strict immigration laws, can actually destabilize the very industries they aim to protect. For automakers, EV manufacturers, and suppliers, the result is rising costs, disrupted supply chains, and uncertainty that makes long-term planning difficult. Contrast this with Canada's approach, which highlights the value of resilience and strategic planning. Instead of reacting chaotically, Canada implemented countermeasures, strengthened domestic procurement rules, and diversified industrial output. By doing so, it protected workers, secured production, and reduced reliance on a politically unpredictable market, the United States. This shows that stability, not aggression, is key to sustaining an industrial base. For global investors, the lesson is clear. A country's short-term protectionist gains may come at the expense of long-term credibility. Multinational corporations need predictable policies, clear rules for labor and materials, and consistent enforcement to commit billions of dollars in capital. The Hyundai case demonstrates how misaligned policies can create uncertainty that drives investment elsewhere, even when the intentions are to promote American jobs and industry. The images are striking: workers handcuffed at Hyundai's Georgia plant assembly line stalled and sensitive equipment left idle. Behind the headlines lies a deeper story of policy contradictions, economic ripple effects, and strained international relations. Trump's tariffs and immigration enforcement were designed to strengthen U.S. manufacturing and protect jobs, yet in practice, they risk undermining the very investments intended to achieve that goal. The bigger picture is this: policies that create uncertainty for global companies can have real consequences at home. Rising costs, disrupted supply chains, and delayed production all translate into higher prices for consumers, and pressure on American workers. Meanwhile, countries like Canada are turning trade pressure into an opportunity, strengthening their industrial base and showing how long-term planning can create resilience in the face of aggressive external policies. So here's the question for viewers to consider. Are U.S. policies creating a secure, stable investment climate, or one defined by risk, contradiction, and unintended consequences? The Hyundai raid is more than a story about immigration or tariffs. It's a warning about the fragile balance between trade, labor, and economic strategy. As global companies, policymakers, and everyday Americans watch the unfolding effects, it's clear that thoughtful, consistent policy is essential for building a strong, sustainable industrial future in America.